Jeffrey Pearson, Guy Outwits Police. Meet a real-life Keyser Soze. If you've ever watched the movie Usual Suspect, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For those that didn't, Soze was a character in the movie. As we continue, more information will be given about the infamous character. But first, let's introduce Jeffrey Pearson from Georgia, USA. The reason why I compare Jeffrey to Keyser Soze is because this young man gave the local police a run for their money. Jeffrey was brought in by police as a suspect for a robbery at the local 7-Eleven. Apparently, in 2011, police responded to a silent alarm at a 7-Eleven. Upon arrival, the robber was nowhere to be found. According to Jeffrey, he was sitting at his friend's house, dog-sitting, when police barged in and placed him under arrest for the robbery. Police claimed they were responding to a disturbance call. Jeffrey had been heavy on heroin at the time of his arrest. This is where Jeffrey shows he knows his rights and will stand firmly by those said rights. I'm sure everyone that has been arrested get very nervous and forget that they have rights during being interrogated. The fear of the outcome would weigh more on their mind, and they tend to allow the officers to have more dominance than they should. But Jeff asserted his dominance at the very beginning. This wasn't his first time at the rodeo. Jeff did what most don't realize they can do. He asked the officers, "Am I under arrest?" What most forget or don't know to do when they are being held. Just a little tidbit for if you're ever brought in by the cops. If you're under arrest, you don't have to sit and be interrogated. You can push for the police to let you go. However, if you are under arrest, you can cut the whole thing short and ask for a lawyer. This is a way to not self-incriminate yourself while being questioned by the police. They have to find you a lawyer, and you don't have to speak to the police unless encouraged to do so by your court-appointed lawyer. Jeff proved he paid attention to his Miranda Rights as well. For those that haven't heard it on TV or had them read to them, this is what it says in the US. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to speak to an attorney and to have an attorney present during any questioning. Because of his previous run-ins with the law, Jeff was quite aware of what it says. This clever suspect used this tactic during his interrogation. What Jeff did was post a video of his interrogation on his YouTube channel later on that year. Watching the footage, you can see Jeff clearly outwitting the officers. Once the officer performed the Miranda Rights, Jeff no longer answers any questions from the officers. However, he did take advantage of the system. He would munch out on candy and coke for the remainder of the evening. Also, another important piece of information: police can only hold you for 24 hours without substantial evidence. In the footage, you see there are 4 50-minute segments, and in each one, you see him drinking a coke and sticking to his rights. Another hurdle Jeff had to deal with was his withdrawal from his heroin addiction. At one point, he clearly asked the officer for methadone. The officer asks him why he needs it, and Jeff explains that he's an addict and it will help with his withdrawal from the drug. The officer then asks him, does he have a prescription for it? Methadone is given to heroin addicts to help them kick the habit. This all takes place with the first few hours of him being held by the police. He's not giving the officers any room to expand on his involvement with the robbery at the 7-Eleven. Immediately, he puts the officers on notice by telling him, "I'm not talking to the police." He would further tell them to take him back to his cell. The officer attempts to be cunning when he asks Jeff about the robbery, and instantly, Jeff goes on the defense. He explains to the officer everything that transpired through the night until the police accost him for the robbery. He even goes further and lets the officer know that they have no evidence to hold him and asks for release. As the night progresses, Jeff continues to fend off the officers. At one point, while he's sitting in the interrogation, the officer asks him to read a statement, and he adamantly refuses. He shows the officers that he's aware of the tactic, and he tells him he's not going to read it or sign it. This maneuver you've probably seen on TV, where the officer asks the suspect to read the statement, then asks, "Does it sound about right?" This tactic is called the read tactic and was created in the 1960s by a detective/psychologist. Yes, it has gotten results, but even in its first attempt at use, the case was dismissed. The guy who was accused of killing his wife was actually innocent, and in Jeff's case, he's not falling for it. Jeff is now 3 and the police are 0. For those that are not familiar with the read technique, here it is. 1. The positive confrontation. The investigator tells the suspect that the evidence demonstrates the person's guilt. 2. Theme development. The investigator then presents a moral justification or theme for the offense, such as placing the moral blame on someone else or outside circumstances. 3. Handling denials. When the suspect asks for permission to speak at this stage, likely to deny the accusations, the investigator should discourage allowing the suspect to do so. 4. Overcoming objections. When attempts at denial do not succeed, a guilty suspect often makes objections to support a claim of innocence. Example, I would never do that because I love my job. 5. Procurement and retention of suspect's attention. The investigator must procure the suspect's attention so that the suspect focuses on the investigator's theme rather than on the punishment. 6. Handling the suspect's passive mood. The investigator should intensify the theme presentation and concentrate on the central reasons he or she is offering as psychological justification, and continue to display an understanding and sympathetic demeanor in urging the suspect to tell the truth. 7. Presenting an alternative question. The investigators should present 2 choices, assuming the suspect's guilt and developing as a logical extension from the theme, with one alternative offering a better justification for the crime. 8. Having the suspect orally relate various details of the offense. After the suspect accepts one side of the alternative, thus admitting guilt, the investigator should immediately respond with a statement of reinforcement acknowledging that admission. And 9. Converting an oral confession to a written confession. The investigator must confirm the oral confession into a written or recorded confession. The technique has confused many suspects, and many innocent people have been tricked into signing a false confession. Jeff is in the midst of his withdrawal, but he still appears sharper than ever. He even appears to become a little annoyed with the officer. In another instance, the officer tries to double talk with Jeff. This forces Jeff to pull his last card, and then he demands a lawyer. Now the officer starts to sweat because he knows the interrogation is coming to an end. He begins throwing out accusations, telling Jeff that he has evidence from the scene. The officer is basically begging Jeff to give him anything. Time is winding down, and the officer knows that he's on his last leg, that this is the last time he'll be able to talk to Jeff without a lawyer. You can even see in his posture that he's pulling out all the stops. Yet, when you look at Jeff, he appears calm and still challenging any and everything the officer is throwing at him. The officer tries to sweeten the deal by bringing up Jeff's parole officer, and Jeff, unfazed, calls him on it. He is someone you don't want to get into a long, hard card game with. Once he realizes his time is almost up, Jeff bows down and holds his ground. He reiterates that he knows that they don't have any evidence. Jeff's cold quotes a piece of the Miranda Rights. He even sarcastically tells them that he only wants snacks and drinks. You can hear the officers frustrated as he denies the snack. This is the point in the video where you can see him spitting into the garbage, tells the officer that he's spitting up blood and needs to go to the hospital. The officer doesn't seem fazed, which is really shameful on his behalf. After a few more rounds of back and forth, Jeff is led back to his cell. A few hours later, Jeff is released from custody with no charges. This cunning guy made the officers work for their paychecks that night. It's nothing to boast about, but because of his bouts with the law, Jeff was able to fend off the charges for the robbery. His knowledge gave him an even footing. It's not clear when he had his revelation, but after this experience, Jeff kicked his heroin habit and began a clean, healthy life. He now posts positive and helpful information. Jeff has started his own movement in helping others become aware of how to handle themselves if ever in a similar situation. How Soze is that? At the end of the movie Usual Suspect, the feeble character walks out of the police station. As he's walking, he begins to change his crippled walk. He straightens his back and does a complete 360, showing he was the criminal mastermind behind the grifters. Jeff did similar with a complete change in his life. This proves we need to always seek knowledge and that life is full of lessons. Also, we don't know where or who our information will come from. Those people will surprise you when pushed against a wall. Make sure you're up on your rights. You are the best defense in any situation, especially when it comes to being arrested. Make sure you know the Miranda Rights in your country and how long you can be held without any evidential proof.